Hello, everybody. Welcome. Today we'll be discussing our introduction to Unit 3, which is all about energy. And in its most basic form, this unit comes down to the kind of the central question of where does the energy for all life come from? And the most basic answer I can give you is the sun. Right? The sun provides energy for all living things either directly or indirectly. And depending on how you get your energy or how you obtain the food or energy you need, you might fall into different categories. So there are two vocab words that you'll need to know for this unit, and they are autotroph and heterotroph. An autotroph is something that can make its own energy. Think of a plant that photosynthesizes, or a little bacteria that can chemosynthesize, which can make its own food out of chemicals surrounding it. Those are autotrophs. While heterotrophs are things that have to consume other organisms for energy, whether it's something like a little herbivore that eats plants, or something bigger like yourself that either eats plants or maybe meat to get its energy source. But when you eat food, you don't directly get that energy right away, right? That the food you eat contains many different molecules and different nutrients that need to be broken down before it can actually be used in your body, right? So you consume a piece of food, your digestive system starts to break down these larger molecules called polymers into smaller molecules called monomers. And those smaller molecules can be more easily absorbed in your body. Um, Monomers, one example is glucose. Glucose is a monomer of carbohydrates. Um, and it's also a pretty important molecule for this unit that we'll talk about a few different times. Um, but those monomers can then be broken down and turned into ATP. And ATP is the energy source that your cells like to use. Um, ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. It is basically the universal energy molecule for all of life. And in terms of importance, it's probably the second most important biological molecule we'll talk about this year, just behind DNA. ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, um, is the form of energy that your cells like to use. When I talked about how food doesn't directly turn into energy right away, um, what has to happen is that food gets converted into ATP. And ATP is the energy source that your cells can use. Um, ATP has a specific structure. Drawing it in your notebook for this unit will be pretty important, where it's got an adenosine molecule, which is like a nitrogenous base, connected to a ribose, which is a little sugar, which is then connected to three phosphate molecules. The energy stored in ATP is between the chemical bonds of the phosphate groups. And that'll be true for a lot of what we talk about this unit. Um, Energy is often stored between the bonds of different chemical molecules, whether it's between different compounds, whether it's between different compounds, like we see between this ribose and phosphate, or within one compound, right? There is energy stored between the bonds of this ribose molecule. Now, it may not be a lot of energy, but there is a little bit of energy stored between those bonds. And so, with this ATP molecule specifically, most of the energy is stored in this last bond between these last two phosphates. And there's a little bit of energy stored between these ones and a little bit less stored between those ones. Um, and so, how this molecule works is you basically plug an ATP molecule into where it's needed, like you would plug in a battery. Something breaks this last bond between the two phosphates, which releases energy that the cells can use. Um, Rare situations, you might have something break this phosphate bond where a little bit more energy is needed. There's not a lot of ATP available. But in most cases, what happens is this last phosphate bond does get broken and it turns ATP into a molecule called ADP, adenosine diphosphate. And the really cool thing about ATP and ADP is it's a molecule that can be recycled. Um, so when you break the last bond between the phosphates and you release energy, ATP becomes ADP. But if there's an extra phosphate floating around where the ADP molecule is, and you have excess energy from some kind of chemical reaction, it can get reset or turned back into an ATP molecule. And it's a reaction that happens back and forth over and over to the thousands of different ATP molecules that are present in your cells. Um, ATP is used for many different things throughout your body, from different chemical reactions that are constantly occurring to mechanical work, moving muscles, moving your body around, thinking, to transport work. We talked about active transport in the last unit and how you needed to put energy in to maybe move molecules across the cell membrane in certain situations. ATP is used in that case as well. So again, ATP, basically the battery of the cell, can be used over and over again, and it's the form of energy that the cells like. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day.